So very, very excited and can't wait to get it on.
Pete, how are you handling the expectations and the pressure from a nation that hasn't won the Cup since 2000?
Yeah, well, I think, firstly for our team, it's been a massive effort to get this far. We've faced a lot of adversity over the last couple of weeks with, things like the capsize and a few other bits and pieces. But for our shore crew, they've really, dug deep to get us a boat that's, very close to 100% for that finals. But, having that extra week now to, get it fully back to 100%, we're just really excited to get into it. And having the Kiwi fans back home, supporting us and getting behind us is something we really appreciate it. And it, really inspires us to keep fighting hard, keep pushing forward. And, as Jimmy says, I'm sure it's going to be, one hell of a battle out there on the water. And that's what we're here for, and that's what we're excited to get into.
Back to you, Jimmy. You mentioned it was tough being on the sidelines. Do you feel that was an advantage or a disadvantage over the past week?
I think it's an advantage for the challenger, for sure. I mean, you do what you can in training, but as athletes, there's nothing like real competition. But that's the game we play. We know that going into it. We had a great qualifying series. We had some great racing there. It definitely went up another level into the playoffs, the semis and the finals. Having said that, we've put in a lot of work. We've obviously been watching and learning from these guys as they've been out there. We've tried a lot of different stuff on the boat, techniques and sailing. So for us too, it's been a great period. We've definitely improved. And, these next 2 weekends will be another great opportunity for that.
Thank you. Pete, where do you see Oracle Team USA's weaknesses?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty hard to find weaknesses in their program. And I think with all the programs, we found it pretty hard to find weaknesses with Artemis, last week, who gave us a great battle. And no, we've definitely, been keeping a pretty close eye on, what those guys have been up to for the last couple of weeks. And no, I think ever since SoftBank's been knocked out, they've been getting some pretty good training in there. So no, we definitely feel like we're a lot harder team after the racing, we have had. And I think that's full credit to the other challengers, the likes of Artemis and BAR for, the way they pushed us in the series and the semi-final and the finals. And we definitely feel like we're a lot tougher team now coming into this than we were a few weeks ago.
Well, that is both of the America's Cup helmsman Jimmy Spittle and Peter Burling speaking there just a few minutes ago at a media conference following the races this morning. It's now 21 minutes past 7. And Ministry for Primary Industry staff are sailing to Stewart Island this morning to start the cull of oysters at marine farms at Big Glory Bay. The ministry is removing the oysters to protect the Fovo Strait wild oyster fishery from the parasite that's been discovered at farms in the bay. Now, fishermen say it's unlikely oyster farming will ever return to the island. MPI's response manager Andrew Sanders says the culled oysters will be buried in landfill.
We considered lots of options, Susie, and what we wanted in the end was a secure area that we could actually bury the oysters very quickly. There's too many risks involved. We looked at the likelihood of sort of cross-contamination or the spread of disease, and the landfill was the best option because it gave us the opportunity to bury the oysters quickly, cover them with lime, and then cover them in landfill dirt very quickly straight away. So it was risk assessment, that's all it was.
They are safe to eat though, aren't they?
Absolutely. So we're looking at the biggest risk of the spread of the disease.
How is it that the disease would be spread if they were eaten instead of being buried?
No, there's no chance of them being spread if they're eaten. They're quite able to be eaten, but you were talking about a significant number. We're talking in excess of 4,000 tonnes.
Did you even explore that as a possibility? Was there a way of them being used in another way rather than simply dumped?
We explored all options, but when we were talking with the farmers and that, the option was that they want to get back to their business as usual as quickly as possible. So it came as basically a joint decision that the quickest option was actually to uplift a lot of them and to take them to the landfill. How
far impacted is mussel farming to be in this area as well? Because they're often on the same lines, aren't they? So you pull up the line and I guess, does that mean the mussels are also going to be at risk?
They do share some lines, but the the mussels aren't significantly affected at all. So the oysters are all we're concentrating on, and there's very little risk of the mussels being affected in the process that we're using.
Okay. On all of this, how long is it going to take to actually carry out this entire operation?
Oh my goodness, Susie, that's a big question. We actually don't know, neither do the farmers. So what we've planned is that today's going to be our first sort of run. We're going to be taking timings of every part of the operation, and that's going to give us an indication after today exactly how long it may take for the operation. The first phase is lifting the cages, and that's quite important. So we'll be gauging how long that takes, and then we move into sort of a second phase, which is when we look at lifting the ropes from the other farms. So it's purely timings on how long it's going to take us to do that, and we'll probably be able to give you an indication, I would say, after today.
How many farms are you actually lifting them from? Because this parasite's been found in 2 farms, is that right?
That's correct. To be honest, we're going to have to gauge that as well. There's a number of farms in the bay. There's 14 farms in the bay, and we have a plan. We're starting with the 2 main ones today. Compensation
here. How is it that you're going to be dealing with farmers who are losing, basically their entire crop?
Yeah, Susie, it's a big question. It's a big question on everyone's minds at the moment, and there are provisions under the Biosecurity Act for compensation. So we have a group of people that are working on that specifically, and in fact we do have a meeting with those affected farmers this week, and we have MPI staff attending that to go through that process with the farmers and the affected people. And in fact, in a lot of cases, they're going to be taken aside and they'll be dealt with one-on-one, just so that we can understand their concerns. And also, it's compensation is a big issue, Susie, but there's the other side of it is support for them as well emotionally. You know, that's a huge issue down here. It's affected a lot of people and employment. It's their livelihoods, and MPI is very aware of that. One of our priorities is to make sure that these people are actually looked after emotionally as well.
That is MPI. I was speaking a little bit earlier on to Andrew Sander. He's the response manager there for the situation with the oysters down at Stewart Island. Well, it's 25 minutes past 7 on Morning Report. And Pike River families say video footage showing a part of the mine apparently untouched by fire lends weight to their push for a re-entry bid to retrieve the bodies of the victims. Well, the footage was aired by News Hub last night. It was taken by a camera lowered into a borehole drilled from the surface some weeks after the disaster. It shows rubber hoses and wooden pallets appearing to be unburnt. The footage also shows a pair of spectacles, and they could have belonged to one of the victims, Ben Rockhouse. The family is saying that the footage is contradicting what they were told, that the explosion and the fires destroyed everything in the mine, and they say they should now be granted their wish to re-enter it. But the minister responsible for Pike River, Nick Smith, says the footage is nothing new, and it's never been claimed that the entire mine went up in flames. Let's talk about this further now with the Prime Minister, Bill English. He's in the Wellington studio with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie.
This footage, does it indicate that the bodies may be recoverable?
Look, it's all been. First of all, look, this is tough for the families again. Their tragedy back on the national news, and we want the same answers as they want. Secondly, I think it's important to understand this isn't new footage. It's been around for a long time. Assessed by the Royal Commission, looked at by the Solid Energy and its role of making a decision under the Health and Safety Act about manned re-entry. So it's been considered. We're working with the families now on doing further unmanned investigation of the mine. That's getting underway to help answer the questions they want answered. But I don't think it fundamentally changes what's going on there.
Are you sure that this footage was seen by the Royal Commission? Because that seemed to be something that was somewhat in question last time round when footage aired.
Well, that would have to be checked with the Royal Commission as to whether they saw this precisely, but they spent a great deal of time and money and effort assessing what happened, where it happened. Bear in mind, the assessment about going in there is not so much about the original explosion, it's about the state of the mine after the explosion and whether it's safe to send people in there.
And on that, families were given the impression clearly from things they said. They've come out of meetings where they've obviously been given the impression that everything was destroyed by a fire in the mine, so there was little point in going in. But it would seem that that is not exactly the case. So where exactly do you understand the fire was in Pike River Mine?
Well, look, I can't speak for the assumptions made by the families or anyone else at whatever discussions were held. The assessment now is whether it was safe for people to go in the mine. Under our law, which we can't suspend just because of one case, the Solid Energy and their board made an assessment about that, all the assessment of that, all the work that there has been made public, and decided that it was manned entry wasn't safe.
Okay, when will the cameras and the robots be going in?
Well, as my understanding, the planning's been going on now for a couple of months, and over the sometime in the next 6 months there'll be further camera work done.
What's the hold up? Why is this not happening faster?
Well, the intent of all this was to work with the families, so that in itself takes time. Particularly, you've got to make sure everyone's well informed and gets an opportunity for the discussion. The technology has greatly improved since the original filming was done, so they've got to get all that together. But you'd be best to address that question to the people actually running the operation.
Sonia Rockhouse is calling on you to do the right thing. What's that?
Well, the right thing is to not lose further lives going into that mine. And we have to do that in accordance with New Zealand law as it stands. People are getting safety briefings, today on places that are obviously much less dangerous than Pike River under the workplace safety law. So the right thing is to work with the families and see if there's, in a safe way, any more evidence that can be gathered to help answer their questions, because they are the people who've suffered this loss and grief.
But is there a problem here that the families, perhaps unintentionally, but the families have been misled?
Look, I wouldn't want to comment on assumptions or discussions to which I wasn't party about issues which have been pretty well canvassed in depth by the Royal Commission. We had a Royal Commission on this.
But you are the Prime Minister. I appreciate you weren't the Prime Minister during much of this period. But nonetheless, this is something that I would imagine you've been briefed on, you've asked questions on. And is it, in your assessment, something where the families may have got the wrong end of the stick, perhaps unintentionally?
I'd be surprised if there's too many aspects of this that haven't been thoroughly looked into. We've had a Royal Commission on it. I'd have to say a media organisation is a bit less rigorous than what was a well-funded Royal Commission where the families had legal representation. The video has been around since 2010, like all the other video. Been a recent discussion to make sure that all the families have seen all of the video, and there's hundreds of hours of it. So I'd be surprised if any particular aspect of this hasn't been looked at, but you can never know absolutely for sure. That's one of the reasons we're going ahead with the unmanned investigation into the mine.
Now, just while you're still here, if we could talk a little bit about Nikki Wagner's tweet over the last couple of days, how would you describe it, the original tweet? Busy with disability meetings in Auckland, but rather be out on the harbour, with a lovely picture of the harbour.
Well, it's easily misinterpreted, and even in that case, it still took 3 days for people to misinterpret it, apparently. And the Twitter sphere usually works on about 5-minute cycles. So after 3 days, so I think it indicates that...
But about the tweet itself, how would you describe it?
Well, easily misinterpreted, and the Minister has said it was a mistake and apologised. Look, the Minister is a great advocate for disability. No one who's worked with her on these issues would believe that she was trying to be offensive, or that she even secretly thinks that she'd rather be doing other things than what she's doing. She does a fantastic job.
She did say that she would rather be out on the harbour, so shouldn't that portfolio be held by someone who actually wants to be in it?
I absolutely disagree with that interpretation. It would be very unfair to Nikki Wagner. She has many friends in the disability community, and they would say she's a great minister. We have a lot of work to do in disability because our traditional systems of dealing with it have disempowered people. Nikki is a strong advocate for people with disabilities having more control over their lives and making more decisions, and we want her to get on with that work and not worry too much about what is actually a storm in a teacup.
Just briefly, was the apology good enough? Because it seemed to be the classic kind of sorry if you were offended rather than actually taking responsibility.
I think the apology was just fine. Look, this is a product of the Twitter sphere, which it tends to be negative for whatever happens. They took 3 days to pick up on it, which tells you that the people who actually follow Nikki Wagner would have seen it the way she meant it, which was it was a lovely day in Auckland.
Appreciate your time this morning. That's the Prime Minister, Bill English, at 27 minutes to 8.
Bit of a traffic issue in Wellington this morning. Crash on State Highway 2. This is at Horokiwi near Lower Hutt. Now, police say multiple cars were involved in this crash. Happened around 7 a.m. this morning. No reported injuries from this, but both the southbound lanes are blocked and drivers are passing very slowly on the shoulder, so you're going to need to expect long delays if you're travelling that way this morning. Well, coming up